So some of you who may have been to one of our Meet the Fund events before, which might have been held by a colleague, you may well have seen this PowerPoint, unfortunately, because it's our general Meet the Funder, but it does give an overview of different types of funding we have. It talks about what type of funding to apply. It talks about the priorities and the community missions, which it says new, but they're not actually that new anymore. I think we're actually at our midpoint of our kind of it starts with community strategy, so it's not new anymore, I don't think. And as Ed, we just said, there's time to ask some things after I've gone through. Just a bit of a broad thing about us. If you're not aware of us, I'm sure you are. We are the largest single source of funding for communities in the UK. Through the Cash Through National Lottery, we contribute about 30 million to good causes every single week. And we distribute through our various kind of funding programs up to £700 million a year across the UK. And as I said, we sort of launched our it starts with community strategy a few years ago, and it runs to the end of the decade. So we are kind of halfway through it, it turned. And obviously we sort of have aims and priorities to go with that, which I'll come back to, but obviously it all falls under our four community missions, which are the focal points, and they are there. And I say I'll come back to these later on the PowerPoint, so I won't focus on these now. And as with anything I say, all the details are on the website, so you can look at the website there. So, so what funding is available from us? So we have two main kind of open programs, which you will probably know about. Obviously, this we've got the awards for all. This is the entry point, I suppose, if you want to call it, to be able to access the funding for us. So this is up to 20,000, and it's over a period of 2 years. So it's changed. I think it changed a couple of years ago because it used to be up to 10. But obviously that's changed up to 20,000 to 2 years. And then the other one is the one I specifically work on with my team, local team, and that's the over 20,000. That's the Reaching Community Programme. And I'll come back to those both to talk for a bit more detail later on. Just a general thing, all the applications should go through the website. So we've got an online application form for both, but of course we do have different ways for people to do application depending on kind of specific accessibility requirements. So we do cater for that. A quick overview about eligibility, which is the same for both, more or less. But there's a few differences, but I'll come back to that. So obviously you maybe were there. We do accept kind of applications from a range of organizational types, but the key, whether it's a charity, constituted group, a CIC, although there's a bit of a love-hate relationship with CICs. And we can accept ones from councils, local authority, and schools, but there are caveats with those. And then kind of it lists the kind of things we can't accept. So examples, obviously, if you're an individual, we can't accept application from individuals. You need to have at least 2 trustees or directors, if you're a CIC, who aren't kind of married, who aren't or related in a particular way. And that's quite a key one that groups tend to fall down on. So we get a lot of kicks sometimes with just a single director, or we get one who's got the same kind of surname, which obviously means they could be you related or married. And the other thing to add to that is obviously we do look at who has the significant control, which is on kind of company's house. It generally is a company thing. So obviously we need to see kind of like one person doesn't have the control with regard to voting rights, etc., because that obviously doesn't really show kind of good governance in an organization. Um, so those are kind of basically Lavucci. There's a longer list on the website, but I just kind of picked out the main things to look at. We're able to fund a wide range of things, from your core costs, the organization's core costs, recruit materials, one-off events. I mean, the whole list there, obviously post-training costs, it sort of goes on. And we can do capital costs as well. So obviously this land is a lot more rarer than being able to fund a building or reversion projects. We can technically fund to buy a building, but those are also very rare, and there's a lot of hoops to jump through with that, which I'll come back to. So it's kind of just be wary of that. But we do fund a lot of stuff. Um, on the 1I1, we can also fund kind of organizational development costs. So something that will help your organization to kind of, whether it's to write a business plan or whether it's a constant visa, not kind of proactively on the website. These sort of ones tend to come from having a chat with us or something where we sort of recognize, or you may send in an application for something and we're kind of going, well, you're kind of a young organization and you kind of need some help with this and this actually. So it may come out of that chat which you might have with us. But it's something which we can do, but it's not actually on our website as a thing. So just to focus on a couple of ones in particular. So obviously I talked about it was for all. This is our kind of say entry level. So this is kind of as I say, it's up to 20,000 up to 2 years. You can interpret that if you kind of are wise to the wise, it's up to 2 years. It doesn't have to be over 2 years. So technically, you could come for 20,000 for up to a year, and then you can come back again after that because you can come back to Walls 4 again. So you don't have to go up to 2 years. So just to kind of like bear that in mind. Um, the only rule about Walls 4 related to that top point is that you can only have one at a time. So you can't have two going at the same time. So you have to end one and then you can come back towards 4. And you can come back for the same thing. So it does have to be something different. And it's kind of aimed at kind of the grassroots organizations. So you need to be wary if you're a large organization with a large turnover going towards 4. It does form part of the assessment, and we do look at that because that's kind of not what Awards 4 is about. It's around trying to reach those grassroots ones who are trying to get going, trying to get used to managing funding. So it's something to be mindful of. So it does tend to look at those with incomes that aren't as high. It's a one-stage application, and there's no deadlines. It's a rolling program, so you can send it in where you want. And the turnaround time, it kind of fluctuates between 10 to 16 weeks. There is another caveat on Awards 4, which has come out this year, kind of like emerged this year, I suppose, is that there's been occasions where obviously they may get an Awards 4 application, but also they will see that you might have one which is also coming to reaching communities as well. So they need to be distinct. So if they get a sense that there's kind of possible overlaps, whether it's regards to the funding or the aims and outcomes of what you each community will want to do, they will probably turn your Awards 4 one down and suggest you add that into your RC one. Because so basically, if you want to go for both, they need to be distinct from each other and not kind of duplicating aims, outcomes, or costs. That's kind of basically it on that point. And it's a really busy program environment. I saw a sort of number the other day that there's about 5,000 applications in at the moment. So that's the volume that they're dealing with. They get in. So it goes up and down, but there is a huge amount of applications at the moment. So just bear that in mind. So whereas the reaching communities priorities obviously are based around the four community missions, and I'll come on to those. Awards for All still kind of works off kind of like these ones which are listed here. So what they're kind of looking for is, applications that kind of bring people together to bring strong relationships. Ones that kind of improve those kind of spaces that kind of mean a lot to people and to communities. The early intervention, and also there's one around kind of helping people to and organizations to overcome kind of the challenges like the cost of living stuff and kind of that sort of stuff. So those are kind of the main things they work towards, which is different from reaching communities, but they are beginning to move towards reaching community type 1. So it's a case of keeping an eye on the website for that. The application process is really simple. There's only 3 things that is asked. What you'd like to do, how it meets the priorities, which I just showed. And the important one for me, and the one from my perspective, because these are assessed by kind of a separate team to us, but we kind of can see sometimes the sort of reasoning that people get kind of turned down from awards for. And it is very much about kind of that engagement with the community which you want to support. And that needs to come across in your application that, this is something they want. You've talked to the community, you've engaged them. So if there was a tip that I would give on awards for all, that's the one you need to nail. You need to know the rest of them, but that's the one you really need to nail right and kind of make that come out of your application. So just a little kind of tip there. Awards for all also has an environmental strand to it, I suppose you want to call it, which is specifically for those awards for what size ones who are doing something which makes which helps people to link in with nature and kind of their area and the environment, and is making a positive difference to the environment. We have an overall KPI to get a certain amount of applications through, which is about the environment, which is why one of the 4 main community missions for reaching communities as well. So they are on the lookout for these types of applications. So if you do have sort of something like that, make sure it comes through in your application that it's and then an environmental one, because something that obviously Wars Fall and the lottery in general is quite keen to fund at the moment. So I say it's all on the website, and there's a page about it as well on the website. Reaching communities. So this is something I know much more about because obviously it's the one that I work on and have been working on for quite a while. So these are obviously the next one up from Wars 4, I suppose you want to call it. So this could be kind of up to 500,000. Those who have got on the website already and are eagle-eyed on the website, I know it does say kind of up to some, I think it says 20 million we can go to. There's a bit of internal chat to get that taken off the website because that's not a feasible thing at all. So, but generally you're looking at between, just above the awards for level, which is 20,000. And generally you can go up to 500,000. You can go above 500,000, but it would be an extra level on top of the process because it has to go to the board to sort of sign that off and consider those ones, and those are only exceptional ones. It's a two-stage application process, so I'll come back to that in a short while. The application online of the formats. And the first sort of little tip I would give, and a little kind of messaging, is make sure what you ask for is proportionate to the size of your organisation and income. And by that I mean, if you're an organisation with a turnover of 30,000 and you come in for a 400,000 grant, it's unlikely to be supported because obviously it's not proportional to what your turnover is, and it's a big leap. And at the end of the day, whatever you ask offers, if it's a £400,000 grant, at the end of the grant period, if we don't want to fund you again for a particular reason, that's what you've got to maintain yourself. So it's that edge. And the more you ask for, the higher the edges, potential edges. So you need to think about your ask with regard to the impacts it might have, that if you do ask for a lot and you do get the funding and you can't maintain that, what are the impacts on the people who you want to support after that point, and how you think about that? So just something really to think about when you come to us. So these are the three main priorities for reaching communities. Number one is all about kind of equity. So we have an equity-based approach of trying to get the funding to those most in need and those that have the least, most disadvantaged. The second one is about it needs to be led by and empowered the the community which you want to support and the shape decisions affect their lives. So it's kind of really that strong community engagement. They need to be leading it from the front about kind of like what to do. And as I said, it needs to align strongly with at least one of the four community missions, which was on the first one I did, was listen. And I'll go into these a bit more detail now, not too much detail, but just a bit more detail. So on the equity one, which is the priority one. So obviously, kind of, we are kind of looking to get sort of funding into those areas that are high on the IMD. Hopefully, people are a bit au fait with the IMD. So this is in the indices of multiple of deprivation. So obviously, we're sort of looking at that kind of one to three areas as a guidance. It's not saying we won't fund outside of that, but this is a kind of targeting the focus we want to get to make sure we get into those areas. And we do recognize there are some areas which might say IMD 5 or 6, which is not very disadvantaged, but there may be you know, pockets of disadvantage in there. And also we do take into account kind of rural disadvantage as well. So we don't discount that. But it is an influence, and it is something that informs how we assess. So it's aimed at those kind of communities that are at least kind of set up to help themselves. So it's targeting those areas where people have the least, and a similar with the organisation. So, and also it's trying to applications of projects that help to address why people aren't engaging, why they're not getting involved. So it's targeting the barriers to participation of people. What are the barriers? How is what you want to do going to help to address those particular barriers why people aren't getting involved in those particular areas? So that's the kind of thing we're looking for groups to meet when they do application to us on the equity side of things. The second one, as I said, is about that community engagement. And this is about meaningly involving the community, designing, developing, and delivering. So, not kind of tokenistic engagement with maybe a survey. We would expect to see much more than that, that you've properly engaged the community in what you want in the idea, and it's their idea. We also can kind of look at the lived experience of the organisation. Kind of what is the board made up of? Is it representative of those people you want to support? What is lived experience among the people who work in the organisation? So we look at that. It's about supporting people who to influence the decisions. So we talk a lot about uh, community power, and giving the power to the local people, and obviously kind of like that kind of runs through this as well, and giving them then the real control over what they want to do in their own area. That's the kind of things we're looking for in kind of through the priority. So a quick run through the community missions. So these are the four which you come onto. So come together, help children and young people thrive, be healthier, and as I said, the environmental one, which is long overdue to be a focus. So I'm always quite happy that this came as one of the four main missions for me. So a quick look at the individual ones very quickly. So the come together is about kind of bringing people together in those kind of spaces or activities, which could be face to face or virtual. So, your village halls, I suppose, community centres, so those hearts of communities where people come together. And what you're doing is enabling that to basically happen, especially in those areas where people don't come together for some reason, or there's some sort of reason why they can't come together. So it's about kind of that kind of stuff. Helping young people is about obviously helping to develop social emotional skills in people, providing the safe spaces for young people and also relationships, making sure the youth voice is right at the forefront of what the young people want to do. It's very important that they're engaged, and it comes through in your application that this is led by young people and you've spoken to them. Very important. And the early intervention side of things. So there's some of the stuff that it would fall under the helping young people one. The Be Healthy one took a long time internally to get our heads around this in the regional teams because it's very broad. Um, it touches on a lot of grey areas of additionality for us and kind of what is our responsibility and what is the responsibility of the National Health Service or kind of other, etc. But it's about supporting people who uh, have health inequalities. Um, so and in helping them to influence the system and over the early intervention. And it's been one that's been bounced around a lot because we get a lot of applications which can be around a single health condition. So, but it needs to be targeted. So it needs to be targeted at a specific community of people who experience health inequalities. So it's a tricky one to go through because obviously something that is open to everyone but still doing great stuff might not be supported. It's about who is targeted at the targeted community. So just think it's a very difficult one. We've been kind of wrestling with a few months, and like it's still proving a challenge at some points for us internally. The environmental one, speak for itself. So it's empowering people to engage with the issues around the environment and the impacts of climate change. Taking kind of part in environmental impacts, positive environmental impacts, reducing carbon emissions, creating space for wildlife, and also the access to nature. So those people who don't have access to natural green spaces, giving access to nature, but quality access to nature. So it's not about taking a group of people who don't have access to green space onto a nature reserve and let them walk around and go, this is great. It's about the impact of that on them and kind of like, so it's more about just give them a green space. But so that's the kind of one you need to be looking at that for. So those are kind of the priorities and the missions, really a broad overview. I said there's more detail on the website for those, which has kind of more detail around them. That was just a broad headliner thing of them. A quick look on how you apply. So as I said, there's two stages to reaching communities, where waterfall is one stage. So first stage, we try not to get groups to do a huge amount of work because obviously we want to see something which we're interested in. So we generally ask a few things like, what do you want to do? Who is going to benefit? So that's the equity question. How does this support people, community shape decisions? That's the community engagement question. And then kind of why are you the right or organization? How are you linked into the area? Who are you working with? Are you working with the right people? Do you have the right experience to do what you want to do? And I say that because one of the knock-on effects from the COVID time when we did our response funding for COVID is that a lot of organizations took on work which and type of work which is normally outside their experience because they were trying to respond to COVID. But what happened was that they wanted to continue that after COVID, where they weren't really the right organizations to be doing that type of work. So it's just to say that, making sure you're the right organization, right experience, talking to the right people to do what you want to do. First stage can take up to 12 weeks, and that's when there's a panel that sits and you'll get a decision that will either say something, we're not interested at this point, this is the reasons why, or yes, we are interested, and then you move on to do a stage 2 application, which is where we ask for more details from you because we obviously kind of are interested in what you want to do. So we ask for much more detail about your finances, about your costs. So you have to break down of costs. And this is the point. This is a change that those who have been to us before know us for a while, whereas we were more on the conversational side at stage 1, whilst we can still do a bit of that, we tend to have the more conversational approach at stage 2. That's when the member of the funding team will engage with you more. They may come back with further information at stage 1, but we won't get involved in a sort of back and forth, and we'll kind of, we'll base a lot on what you put in your application. So you need to get that right. But stage 2 is when they'll come out to see you and they'll talk through your projects and what we need and how to kind of get that bit done with information that we need from you on that side of things. The overall turnaround time from first stage to final outcome, if you get through to second stage, is broadly around 6 to 9 months. It is a long time, but if you see the workload which we have, you'll understand that it does take a long time to get through everything. With the other responsibilities which we have as well outside doing assessments on these projects. So you need to factor that time in. We still get groups who send in an application in February time who want to begin in March. Obviously, it's not realistic at all. So you need to kind of factor that time frame in and what that means for you as an organization, is what I would suggest. The key messages to round off, and this is where I'm going to be doing a bit of bad cop, unfortunately, at this point. So I'm sorry about this, but we do need to be honest. So the overarching message we've been saying to all groups and have been for the last couple of months is thinking about applying, don't apply till the autumn at the earliest. This is because we have a substantial amount in our pipeline as it stands at this moment. So we wouldn't want groups to kind of rush and do a lot of work to send something in when there is a more than likely chance that we might just have to say no because we don't have the room and we have kind of a thing. So we felt better to be honest and open about, and these people will know from the outset that this is kind of when to think about applying if you want to apply. Other key messages about where you want to apply is obviously, as I've touched on before, be very sensible with what you ask for. So we're in a kind of landscape where there's been cuts to funding here, there, and everywhere. The pots of funding are more competitive. So it's very much not a landscape for me, an environment to expand and to grow. It's about kind of, it's not about think about what you need rather than what you want. Because as I said, like, whatever you ask offers at the end of the day, if we don't fund you again, that's what you've got to maintain. And it's better to be able to provide a sustainable, continual service to the people you want us to support, rather than grow and expand for a short time and probably increase your impact, but then come to the edge, and that impact will completely drop, and ha you you have a bad effect on those people which you want to support. So it's really important to think about that. Don't try and meet all those four kind of your community missions. You may feel the urge that you're better off if you try and answer everything and go, we meet all of them. That actually dilutes your application, because it just comes across that you're trying to do everything, and you're not particularly focused. And also remember, and I'll come back to this a few times, you only have a certain amount of words to write in the application form, so don't waste words. So think about kind of what you really need to get across to us. So you just have to meet one. If you meet two, that's fine, but you don't have to meet all four. Think about which program is right for you and the size of your organization. So if you're a grassroots organization that doesn't have a track record of accessing funding, don't come to you're reaching communities for £100,000 grants. Go towards for that access to that entry level point, to kind of get used to get a track record of managing grant funding. So it's just thinking about that, because people see that the amounts they can go for each community and think, oh, that's brilliant, let's go for that. And it's unlikely you'll get the funding, and obviously it just means you do a whole lot of work for something which you're just not right for at this present time. Capital ones do take longer. So we say 6 to 9 months. Capital ones will be on the outer edge of the 9 months, potentially longer. And this is because obviously we have to involve our capital team with all the capital requirements, and we have to involve our legal team. And I'll tell you, we never like to involve having to go to our legal team, because it caused a great deal of pain for us. So if you have capital ones, then you need to be aware that there's a lot of hoops to jump through with those on that legal side. And there is guidance on the website for capital ones as well, so you can see what is involved from the outset. Make sure you know what else is going on around you. Are you duplicating something that's happening just down the roads, or are you complementing it? So that needs to come through in your application, because obviously we have the unique kindness of having the broad overview. So we know a lot of organisations working across Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire, and we can see kind of if someone's doing something very similar to what you want to do just over here, and you're trying to do the same thing, which is going to duplicate. So it's important to get that across, that what you're doing is complementing whatever is going on in a local area. If you're going for Wards 4, I think I mentioned, it's a desk-based assessment. So they will not get in contact with you. They will not talk to you, not in a bad way, but just because of the volume they have to get through. So they will base their assessment on your application. So when I talked about the community engagement side on Wards 4 and getting that right, that's kind of what I'm relating to, is that they will only see that and assess you off that. So you need to get your application spot on Wards 4. We are looking, especially at the moment, and will be continually, what I call kind of the best of the best, is kind of those that really strongly align with our community priorities. And that's just the way to kind of how we have to manage the demand. So at the end of the day, there may be nothing wrong with what you send an application for, but we may have to turn it down ones which are perfectly fundable, and that's just because of the fact we can't fund everything that comes to us, and we do get a huge amount. So when you're trying to argue, you put your rationale, how you align with the equity priority, the community engagement, and the poor commissions. That needs to come very strongly across in your application. So as I said, I don't. Sorry for being a bit of a kind of a downer on some of the stuff, but we do need to be honest and open with groups about kind of the sort of challenges we've got. So that's it.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Yeah, I
Josh.
think it's useful to be honest. Yeah, there's a few questions in the chat which I'll get to it. But yeah, it feels like a real sort of shift in the environment in terms of applying for funding. That sort of not to expand and grow, because I sort of remember I've been around the block a long time now, and that it just feels like a real shift from a few years ago where kind of it was a natural sort of progression for Awards for All, and then sort of growing to reaching communities.
Well,
and
no,
that was, yeah.
So no, that's not what I meant. I mean that your journey is still kind of the right way to go, is Awards for, and then you kind of grow. What I'm talking about is like if what you want to do, you want to expand into a different area or grow your organization to take on more staff and more stuff. It's not an environment. I don't think it's an environment landscape for that at the moment, a landscape with regards to the funding, because the lack of funding out there and kind of so it's just thinking that's not to say if that's what we want to do, that is fine. I'm just saying just to think about that when you want to come to us.
Thank you for clarifying that. The other sort of thing I picked up as well is that, and I don't know whether this is a shift or just yeah. So with Awards for All, I do know that some applicants sort of in kind of years gone by, if there was a small query about the application, sort of around costs often, the assessor would ring the applicant up. Is that something they're not doing now? So it's got to be spot on.
Don't quite. As far as I'm aware, it's very desk based, and it is purely because of the volume. So maybe the sort of the increase in volume has that dictated, like they just don't have the capacity or the sort of time for that. I sort of mentioned the 5,000 applications in the queue at the moment. That is a humongous amount of applications to try and get through. So to take the time to go back to groups, to talk to groups, it doesn't seem a doable thing, unfortunately.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, there's a couple of questions about CICs, and I'd sort of picked up something as well. Sort of you mentioned about kind of that love-hate relationship with CICs and a number of directors. Is that something new? Because I know Sport England's like kind of been all over that for a number of years now in terms of significant control, and I think Sport England's more strict because they require at least 3 directors. So is that a bit of a shift?
No, it's not a shift. The 2 directors always been there because it's governance, basically good governance. Because if you just have the 1 director of the C&C, then they have the total control over the CIC, and what it does, who it hires, who it fires, decisions. You need to have the governance there to have kind of like to have good governance of the organisation. So that has always been there. I think that's not changed. The significant control thing is something that it's not in the website guides and stuff, but it's something which we do as part of the assessment tend to look at. And if someone's got like 80% voting rights, 75% voting rights, then they effectively can basically vote anyone off the board they want to, which kind of can sometimes not be good for the organisation governance wise. So it's just it's something that first one has always been there, and it is there, and it's in there, and it will be turned down if it's just the 1 director. That's just the policy we have and the eligibility. The other one is not really a policy, but it's something that we do tend to look at, and we do tend to suggest to groups that they need to look at that if they want to continue to come to our funding.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and then one I sort of picked up was caveats for local authorities. So obviously they have large amounts of money, but to do kind of statutory requirements. But yeah, sometimes the local authority is kind of best placed to deliver something. Is that really difficult for local authorities to apply to the fund?
It's not. Just just to go back to the kicks, I was just going to say something extra on kicks, if that's all right. But I did say the kind of love-hate relationship with kicks we have, and I think I think it's that kind of love-hate I talked about. Kicks can apply, and I think it's about being a genuine kick when you come to us, and that's obviously with the intention to trade an income. Some people just set up kicks because it's the easiest one to do, where they're not really a kick. They've got no intention to trade income, and they sort of come to us and they kind of go, "Are you really the right type of organisation to become lottery funding?" Because so that's kind of love hate. Is that kind of like, if you're a kick and you're a genuine kick and you want to trade an income, then that's fine. But if you're just going to become a kick because it's the easiest thing to do, then it'd be good to get some advice to see if that's the right type of one. Because obviously, kind of, if you're a CIO, for instance, as another organizational type, that opens more access to funding than a kick would have. Because I don't think Lloyd's foundation funds kicks, for instance. So it does kind of bar you from going for grant funding if you're not a genuine kick. So that's why I kind of like want to mention. With the local authority ones, I mean, we don't get a lot of local authorities come to us. We get some occasionally town councils, borough councils, district councils, sorry. But I think it's about where they might find it difficult. I think the difficulty to them is about how they're engaged with the sort of local areas. Some councils aren't very community engaged, some are. And also it depends on what they actually come for. As you say, they may be the right organisation to do what they want to do. But if it's something which is obviously something which is their responsibility to do, then obviously that won't get you particularly far. I mean, the whole additionality side of things is a very kind of quagmiry grey area thing, was about where do we go into the space and what spaces do we go into, especially when funding's been cut in certain areas. Is that somewhere where we're able to move into, or is that not for us? So it's a very case by case thing, and there's no kind of easy answers to that one. So we just kind of treat each one on its individual merits and what it's doing and kind of etc. So that's kind of our take on that one.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, hotspots. So you mentioned kind of the current environment in terms of the kind of that pressure point in the system, and that it might start to relieve a bit in autumn, but then there's that worry that everybody applies in autumn, so you get that pressure point building again. But I do remember, sort of like previous conversations with you, that there are certain districts that are really kind of a boiling point in terms of applications, and others that not so much. Is that still the case? And kind of what's the advice regarding that?
So we do have kind of various a few cold spots, like South Derbyshire is one where we get difficulty getting applications in from. We have seen a couple recently, but they're by no means kind of a lot. We have kind of improved in areas like kind of Bolsover recently, although that's still historically underinvested. Places like Ashfield is another one, which is always. But we're quite wary of Ashfield in the sense that there's so much danger of saturation funding in Ashfield, because I know that there's a lot of other funding going into Ashfield at the moment, and that could have a bad effect of actually too much going in more than stuff. So we do have to think about that as well.
Yeah.
But generally, kind of, there's kind of the main cities of kind of Nottingham and Derby is where we get the most applications from, which is generally probably always going to be the case. We do find in Chesterfield, we get application for Chesterfield. High Peak's okay. Derbyshire Dales maybe could do with a few more from the area, but it has to be framed in the caveat that they still need to be really good applications. It's not the sense of like, just because there's a cold spot, we will kind of fund anything in there. Not to put in to put in that particular way, but they still need to be strongly aligned with our aims and priorities, as I just discussed.
Is Osh still one? Because it used to be.
Ours is a bit better. We've got more funding in and we get more applications now. So that's kind of become more of I suppose, a lukewarm spot if you want to put a phrase on it. So we've actually gotten better in our wash through what we've been doing, so which is good.
Okay. I'll go on to some of the questions in the chat. So one of them was around the National Lottery Community Fund's definition for higher income for awards for all. Do you have sort of a ballpark kind of figure around that?
I don't have a ballpark figure. I know it's being discussed to help the demand whether they will put a figure on it. So unfortunately, I couldn't answer that. So I'm sorry about that. But it's just something to be mindful. It's more something to be mindful of, that it does kind of come into the assessment if you have a huge turnover. And sorry, I can't give a figure on that. I wouldn't like to put myself on a spot.
I suppose there will be some obvious ones that are just like really big. So
Yeah.
Can you have a general awards for all award as well as an environmental awards for all award at the same time, or is it you have to apply for one or the other?
It's one or the other.
Yeah. Okay. And there's a question around building projects. So I suppose the first question, I'll split it up a little bit. So if you're applying for a large grant of over £500,000 for a building project, is that something that's possible? I know back in the day it used to be about 50,000 a few years ago. So
it's possible. Capital ones always go up to the higher end, especially if it's kind of a rebuild or kind of that ilk. But obviously, as I've talked about, the over 500,000, it will go. Obviously, it goes to a pipeline panel, and then obviously it gets through that. It goes to a regional panel. It's successful through that. Over 500,000 have to go to the board. So the board signs off and considers those ones, and they have to be exceptional. So be because of the size of the amount. So that's just something you need to think about if you want to go down that route. That it takes longer. There's more hoops to jump through.
I'll just sort of read the follow on from that question. So it says for a one-off building project, but are a low turnover community organisation, do you still have to demonstrate that you can sustain that level post the build, or just that you can maintain the building post the build? Or also, could you use the grant as part funding with other partners on a shared site? So there's this kind of three bits to that, really.
Sorry, that kind of is probably like this slightly not related to kind of like edge of it, because capital one's different because of that you're paying out for something. If say if you're doing a rebuild of something, you'll be paying out for that rebuild. They obviously kind of you may have some revenue costs built into that to kind of run the building. Afterwards, obviously that's the side of things you would need to maintain. But that we would like to see that the building would you would be able to maintain the building, and obviously kind of we do have a asset period for buildings of 5 years, I think, the liability period. So we would still kind of have asset ownership of that building for 5 years. So we would have to monitor that it is being used. So that point about the edge is mainly related to revenue ones, where there's ongoing costs that you would have to maintain. Sorry. So capital ones obviously is a little different because obviously you pay out for that for the actual work that's done.
Thank you. There's one about reaching communities. So can we start applying for a reaching communities project, which is a progression of an awards for all bid we currently have, before we finish the awards for all projects?
Yes, you can. Obviously, make sure there's no overlap. So obviously, you think about the time scale I gave for reaching communities, about kind of how long it takes, and obviously, we would see that you've got an active awards for when that's due to finish, and obviously we would, if we felt that there'd be some kind of time scale issue, then that you'd be wanting to begin, for instance, before that finishes, we would get in contact with you and say that, and probably talk to you about that. The thing I would say about jumping from awards for all into reaching communities is basically, again, it goes back to that sensibility approach. Be mindful what that jump is. So if you go for the awards for all, for instance, and then you suddenly go for £200,000 one of each communities, that's kind of an artificial growth and not a natural growth. So natural growth for me if you are that level, is that, you know, we've been looking at like 80,000 awards for, sorry, 80,000 region communities. So it's a kind of a jump, but it's not a huge jump from where you were. So that's just something to be mindful of as well.
What time of year is actually the best time to apply? So we mentioned that sort of autumn, really, but
There's
yeah.
no time of year better. I would like to say, I'd love to say there was, but there's no time of year the better to apply. But there's no hidden tips on that, unfortunately. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah. So can an organisation apply for a Reaching Communities grant when it's already received one for another project? So is that two Reaching Communities at the same time?
Technically, yes, but we would look at that. Not only the capacity to manage two, but also we need to take into account the limited funding we've got and the fair spread of funding. So it's going back to that kind of, you know, we have to think about the organisations who do come to us and how we want to invest and where. But technically, yes, you can, and yes, we have done that before.
Okay. Yeah, awards for policy on repeat applications. So applying once and then going back for more money. That's okay, isn't it? But
yeah, you can. I mean, there's no guarantee on that, but the rule is basically you just can't have one at the same time. So you can go back towards fraud. So yes, you can go back for what you were doing the first time round.
Okay, thank you again, Mark. It's been very interesting.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Nice to meet you all. See you later.